Good morning. I'm Luke Pecoraro, Director of Curatorial Services here at the Jamestown-Yorktown Foundation, and today is World Whiskey Day. So as such, I'm broadcasting to you directly from the Jamestown Settlement Museum in the recreated early 17th century storehouse, and you can see behind me a nice array of casks suitable for celebrating such an occasion. But why are we here today, and why are we talking about World Whiskey Day and how it relates to America? Well, we're here at Jamestown, as I mentioned, and as the site of the first permanent English settlement in North America in 1607. There were no distillers who were set up here in early North America. The native Powhatan Indians did not have a clear cultural tradition of distilling spirits, so that's something that is brought over directly from England and elsewhere in Europe and transplanted to the American colonies for a truly cosmopolitan beverage that is not only American but international in scope. So, as part and parcel of what we do here at JYF, what we do is base our material culture, so everything that you see surrounding me in this building, on archaeological evidence from the excavations at historic Jamestown right next door. But we also go into the 18th century and talk a little bit about the formative years of the colonial period leading up to the American Revolution at the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown. And that's all based on archaeological evidence from excavations at Colonial Williamsburg, Yorktown, the Yorktown battlefield, to all inform us on the different materials that we have here in our collection. Now, 2 years ago, we were very successful in securing for our permanent collection at Yorktown a late 18th century 90-gallon copper still. And the unique thing about this is not only is it a very cool artifact to talk about on a day like today, but it's stamped with the initials FS. And then on the other side of the still, it's stamped with more information, F. Sanderson. So what we're able to do as historians, archaeologists, and material culture specialists is go back and have a look at the historical record and figure out exactly who F. Sanderson was. And we're very fortunate to have a great paper trail with him. Francis Sanderson was a coppersmith who was operating in both Pennsylvania and the Lancaster area and Baltimore, and also Hagerstown and Frederick, Maryland, at the outbreak of the American Revolution. He was well known for making copper pot stills that were sent all over Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland at the time to farmers who were distilling spirits on the frontier using corn, rye, and barley, other grains that could be distilled down to form a nice alcoholic spirit, now known as whiskey today. Now, the copper pot still that we have in our collection is particularly unique because when you look at the American Revolution and the spirits that fueled it, America was primarily a rum and wine drinking place prior to the outbreak of open warfare with Britain. After that, restrictive acts limited the amount of sugar, the amount of rum, the amount of molasses, other materials needed to distill these spirits into the American colonies, so grain alcohol became the dominant spirit. In fact, in early 20th century Kentucky bourbon advertising campaigns, they would often use the phrase "born with America" as a way to better distinguish American-made whiskey from products made elsewhere, notably in Scotland and the United Kingdom. So a little bit more about Francis Sanderson and his shifting loyalties. Francis Sanderson was not a patriot, he was a loyalist, even though he was contracted in 1776 by the Baltimore Committee of Public Safety to make copper kettles and other things for the Maryland line that was going off to fight the British. He was openly slanderous about General Washington and said that the Americans were better off making peace. That got him booted out of the Maryland colony, and in 1779 we find Sanderson in Pennsylvania. Now, during this period, the British are marching on Philadelphia. The Americans enter into a series of disastrous defeats that ultimately leave Philadelphia abandoned to the British, and Sanderson himself aids British casualties of war. So he gets banished from Pennsylvania at that time, and he finally winds back up in Maryland at the end of the war. But it's interesting to have a loyalist coppersmith who's making these copper stills being sold all throughout the colonies and then into the early republic. And to have a unique example of his product here in our collection is quite rare indeed. So That being said, there are a number of different spirits that we celebrate on World Whiskey Day. It's not just Scotch, which is whiskey that has to be distilled primarily from barley and other grains and made exclusively in Scotland and the UK. It's not just bourbon, which is a particularly great American invention made in charred oak casks that has to be produced a certain way. The dominant grain has to be corn with that. And then rye and other grains ultimately end up going into what makes up a bourbon. And then there's rye whiskey, which is a distinctly Maryland and Virginia product when you really get at the roots of it in the early Republican colonial period, although we don't think of it as much today. So with all of that, I know I've spoken to you an awful lot, so I encourage you to raise your glasses in a toast to World Whiskey Day. All right, well, if you like this content that you saw here this morning, please go check out some of our other YouTube videos at jyfmuseums.org. Like us, follow us, check back often for more great content related to the Jamestown Settlement Museum and American Revolution Museum at Yorktown.